So, our next, by the way, heat pumps nowadays, usually they have a backup fuel. So if they're using electricity in very cold weather, they will have either a gas or some other backup so that they can deal with the really, really cold weather. So there is that advantage. Our next speaker is Mark Durenberger. Mark Durenberger is the founder of New England Clean Energy, a company that installs solar power generation systems and solar charged batteries for homes and small businesses in many regions of the New England. In 2006, Mark was trained by Al Gore to deliver a bit of a story here that's interesting. Mark was trained by Al Gore to deliver the Gore's An Inconvenient Truth presentation. Mark presents talks on solar systems, renewable energy, energy efficiency, and net zero homes. He also trains students at the continuing education program for home builders and remodelers of Central and Western Massachusetts. Mark has a master's degree in energy engineering and a bachelor's in nuclear engineering from UMass Lowell. A resident of Hudson, Mark is active in solar policy development. He also sits on the board of a theater company called the Calliope Production of Boylston. Mark is also an avid woodturner and a member of the Central New England Woodturners Association. He's been married for 34 years and has a 29-year-old triplets and 5 or 6 cats.
Yeah, it's hard to keep track of all the cats. Okay, so how do we get to my slides? Yes. I can do his presentation too if you want. Thank you. No worries, no worries. Take your time. Perfect. There it is. One up, one up. Perfect. All right, let's get that in the presentation. Excellent. Thank you. Okay, so he just did my bio, so I'm not going to tell you all the other weird stuff, but 15 years, 3,000 solar systems. We started in Hudson. We're still in Hudson. We cover Eastern Mass, Rhode Island, Southern New Hampshire, Southern Maine. Residential, small, commercial. If you go out on solar reviews, you'll find that we're the highest rated New England installer from a customer service standpoint. We pride ourselves on our customer satisfaction. I live in the area both as a solar installer but as a human, and I run into my customers all the time. I am never embarrassed to run into a customer. I will not hide behind a kiosk of soup cans if I see you at the grocery store. Okay, raise your hand if you think man-made climate change is real. And here all the hands are here. Next one. And this is a nice little chart, just shows you where CO2 is these days, right? I probably don't have to show any of you this, you've all seen it. And then the other one is raise your hand if you think energy prices will stay the same or go down. And no hands go up, right? We know what's happening to the price of energy. Here are the data for Massachusetts since 2010. It's 4.4% a year is the price of electricity's been going up. That's about a penny a kilowatt hour per year for, say, a National Grid customer or an Eversource customer. So energy prices are going up, carbon count's going up. This is what's driving people to go solar. Okay. So how does it all work? It's really fairly straightforward. We happen to be what's called an N-phase primary product. N-phase is a microinverter. You put one per panel. They go up on the roof. It's cool because it allows you to see the output of each individual panel. Some people really find that cool. I look at mine once a month. Some people look at them every day. It's up to you, you know. All of those, there can be multiple strings of panels on the roof. They get brought back to a combiner box, and then that combiner box feeds into the breaker panel most of the time. And when you are producing electricity, it flows to the house. If the house is using it, if the house isn't using it, it goes out through what's called a net meter, and that's a meter that counts forward and backward. In the olden days, and actually your current meters only count up. So when someone gets a solar system and they want to turn it on before the utilities put in a net meter, we tell them no, because the meter, if they export any power, they'll get charged for it. The reason that happens is because in the olden days, people figured out that you could put a meter in upside down and it would count backwards and they'd lower their electric bill. Well, the meter company said, oh, we're going to fix that, and now the meters only count one direction, no matter which way current's flowing. So, but a net meter counts forward and backward, depending on what's going on in the house and how much being generated. And then if you decide you want to add a battery, this is a simplified diagram of a battery, but you have your combiner, you have a battery, and there's a transfer switch in there. If anybody has a whole house generator, it's a very similar setup to a whole house generator, where the transfer switch isolates the house during an outage, and the battery powers the house loads. And you, depending on the battery configuration, you can power the whole house, or you can power what we call protected loads. So maybe you want to only power your water pump and your furnace and some lights in the kitchen. You put that in a sub-panel, and those are the panel loads that are protected during the outage. Right? During a power outage, a traditional solar system does not function. It must sense 240 volt, 60 cycle grid power for it to operate. It has to shut down because you're connected to the grid, and you don't want to electrocute some poor linesman that's out there trying to fix the grid. Okay? With a battery backup system, because of that transfer switch, it isolates the house. You're no longer exporting power to the grid, and therefore the system can produce power for the house and not risk some poor linesman out there. And of course, with the battery, nowadays the solar charges the battery, so you can go quite some time, depending on how you live during the outage. You know, you're not going to be running laundry, for example. Your electric dryer is not going to be turned on, hopefully, during a power outage. And you minimize your loads and live a little carefully. During an outage, you can go quite a long time on a battery. And of course, it's a function of the battery, the size. Battery size matters. Net metering, fairly straightforward. When you produce that kilowatt hour, if you use it right away, it means that the grid, national grid meter is going slower, so you're buying less from them. If you don't need it, it runs the national grid meter backwards, so you're building a credit with them. And then you build up credits. The excess credits get carried forward minus a little cut off the bill for like the renewable energy charge or something like that. So you get a slightly less than full retail credit, but pretty darn close. Okay? Net metering is a little complicated if you start to go systems larger than a certain size. Some of my competitors will go out there and tell you that you can't do a system larger than 10 kilowatts. That is absolutely not true. You can go as large as you want. It just changes the economics of the system. Because what happens is when your system crosses that 10 kilowatt AC threshold, then the excess generation that you build on your account is now, instead of being worth close to retail, it's worth about 5 cents a kilowatt hour. But if you design a system that's larger than 10 and you don't anticipate having much excess, that might not be a problem. So we look at that, we do that analysis for customers all the time. What goes into a system? Photovoltaic panels, we call them modules in the business. Our particular brand of lately is REC and Q-Cell. We were a heavy LG dealer. LG, like 4 weeks ago, announced that they are leaving the panel business, so we had to switch a whole bunch of projects. We use N-phase microinverters. Those are 1 per panel. 25-year warranty, very reliable product. You know, they've had their challenges over the years, but about 4 generations ago, the product was failing regularly. Of course, that's what's on my roof. But they've been great about warranty support, and their new products, very reliable, way better than that 1 generation product they had. So we're like 4 generations away from the one I have. There's racking that holds the panels in place, and then there's all the wire and conduit and all that other good stuff. Panels are typically anodized aluminum, but they're black nowadays. Used to be you could get them in silver. Almost nobody does a residential panel now with a silver frame, because aesthetically everybody likes the black panel. Tempered glass, roughly 70 by 40, and they vary a little bit by manufacturer. They weigh about 45 pounds. Some of the premium panels out there have a 25-year material warranty, a 25-year power production warranty, and a 25-year labor warranty, where they pay some of the labor costs if a panel fails. And then your standard panels is material and power production without a labor warranty. I'll say right now, panel failures are extremely rare. I've been doing this 16 years. I can probably count on one hand the number of electrical panels we've had fail for electrical reasons. Baseballs, lawnmowers up against ground mounts, soccer balls, branches, those take out way more panels than the panels of electrical problems. This is a typical roof. This is using the REC Alpha Pure 405 watt panel. You can see it's all black. There isn't a bit of white showing through on these panels. All the manufacturers now have pretty much all black panels. And then when we do a ground mount, we use a racking system that doesn't require any concrete foundations. It sits right on the surface of the ground, and then we use some cable anchors driven down 3 or 4 feet, and those keep the array from blowing away. There you can see a solar panel with a silver frame in that picture. We often will use a commercial panel on a ground mount because they're more cost effective. Ground mounts tend to cost a little bit more than roof mount systems. When we're doing a roof, we lag to the rafters or the decking, depending on which mounting bracket we're using. The bottom of the bracket is sealed with an EPDM. It's a kind of rubber patch and a urethane-based sealer. And then the panels are tilted at the same angle as the roof. So it used to be, in the olden days, we would tilt the panels up steeper than the roof to improve production. We found that it's not worth the extra cost, the extra wind load, the look, all of those things, so we no longer do tilted arrays. And then grandstand mounts, they're engineered for local wind and snow loads, and the cable anchors, as I mentioned earlier. This is a typical roof attachment. You can see under the bottom of the pedestal, there's that rubber patch, or it's a built-in rubber seal, and then they fill the holes with a caulk before they tie the legs, screw the legs into the roof. Most installers now guarantee their roofs against, their installations against leaks. We do, so if you have a leak, it's my problem, and since I don't get paid to fix it, we try to avoid them at all costs. The hardware has evolved to the point where we just don't have leaks anymore. There was a time with the old raft when we had to lag to a rafter, and the guy would drill a hole and he missed the rafter. He would have to drill another hole, and then we would patch that hole that we made, and if we forgot to patch that hole, that would be a leak. We own that, right? But nowadays, since we don't have to lag to rafters anymore, we don't miss any, we don't have extra holes or misses where we drilled in to try to hit a rafter. What affects the cost? The major variable is the system size, right? How many panels, right? You do 10 panels, it costs one price. You do 20 panels, it's going to cost roughly twice that, right? Whether we're doing a roof mount or a ground mount affects the price. Like I said, ground mounts are a little bit more expensive. Panel makers affect the price. Like for example, our REC panel is a little bit more expensive than our Q-cell panel. Primarily, even though one is 405 watts, the other is 400 watts, the warranty is what's different between the two. And then the inverter maker. For example, the Enphase product's a little bit more expensive than some of the competitors. It's got a better warranty, it's a very reliable product, and so we think it's probably worth it in almost all cases. What affects the return on investment? Well, first off, it's how good is your roof? Does it have good southerly face? Is it clear of shade? What's the tilt? All of those things get factored into the calculations in terms of how much production you're going to get. The return on investment is dramatically different in Westborough than it is in Hudson. Here in Westborough, you pay 24, 25, 26 cents a kilowatt hour. In Hudson, I pay 11 cents. So when you generate a kilowatt hour here in Westborough, you're offsetting a 25-cent kilowatt hour. When I generate a kilowatt hour in Hudson, I'm offsetting an 11-cent kilowatt hour. Greatly affects the return on investment. Then the net metering policy matters. Here, as long as your system is under 10 kilowatts, every kilowatt hour you make is worth pretty close to retail. In Hudson, when I export, they pay me 5 cents for that kilowatt hour. So I'm offsetting when I use it at 11 cents, but anything I don't need right away and goes out to the grid, I get 5 cents for it. Right? So that affects the economics. And then some towns have rebates. Hudson does have a rebate, Westborough doesn't. And so that can maybe help Hudson a little bit. And then of course the tax credits. There's a federal tax credit that is 26% of the system cost. It is slated to drop to 22% next year. We'll see if Washington can get their act together and keep it at 26, or maybe make it go back up to 30 where it used to be. I have no faith in DC, but we'll see. The last time it was slated to drop, the solar people and the oil people made a trade. It was what I would call a pinch your nose kind of a trade, where the solar people said, fine, if you let us keep it at 26%, we'll let you export US generated oil. And so that was sort of a, okay, well, we'll have to take the good with the bad. The tax credits, of course, only apply if you're paying taxes. Anybody here not paying taxes? Yeah, I don't think so, right? I mean, if you're 12, maybe you're not paying any taxes, right? So yeah, all of these, so these factors, this tax credit, coupled with supply chain issues, coupled with a weird kind of Department of Commerce investigation, it's making business a little bit crazy. I mean, we had a really awful 2 years ago because of COVID. Last year, things picked up a little bit better. This year, it's insane. We're selling about a month's worth of work every week. People are just dying to get in. They want to get in before the tax credit changes, and so they're acting early. Oftentimes, we will get a call. It'll be like October or November, and they'll say, "Hey, can you get me in by time the tax credit before the tax credit expires?" And technically, the way the tax law is written, the system has to be functional by the end of the year for you to apply to qualify for the tax credit. And usually when I get a call in October, it's like, I'm sorry, I'm sold out. I have no install capacity, even when I use a subcontractor to help, increase production. So don't wait is, I guess, the message. Here are the economics for a typical system. This is a 20-panel system. In fact, it's in Westborough. It was shadier, but I took some of the shade down just to help visualize what's going on. If you come over to our table today, we're doing these designs. Roy's sitting there now doing them. We can do a design live on your house, do a panel layout, draw in the trees, do the irradiance calculations, and do a production estimate. And if you happen to be able to log into your National Grid account and give us your electric usage, we can figure out how big a system you need. What we try to do is build a system that will match your load. So if you're using 8,500 kilowatt hours a year, we're going to try to do a system that'll generate 8,500 kilowatt hours a year. The main reason is that if you start generating more energy than you're using, then it shows up as a credit on your bill, and you won't get paid for that credit until you close the account, or like move, sell the house, that sort of thing. Right? In fact, one of my customers is Kate Donahue, who some of you have met. She's running for office. I did her system in 2011. She has a $600 credit on her account. So the system is generating more electricity than she needs. She's like, what do I do with this credit? And I'm like, use an electric heater in your kitchen or wherever you are during the winter, right? That's a way to, or get an electric car or something like that to use up those credits. Otherwise, you're not going to get paid for those credits until you sell the house. These are typical numbers. I wouldn't say it's exact, but it gets us close. This is a 20-panel system, so it's a little over 8 kilowatts. It's about $36,000. The federal tax credit and the state tax credit would come out around $10,000. Your net cost is $25,000. In the first year, you'd save about $2,500 on your electric bill. But with electricity inflation, remember I talked about it at 4.4% a year, you're looking at about an 8.5-year break-even point. For this particular site, it varies by site, right, based on your production. And I also model a production degradation. Every manufacturer has a production degradation built into their warranty. In the real world, we do not see panels degrade as fast as the warranty allows for them to degrade. And that makes sense, right? The manufacturers like to cover their butts, so to speak, and keep they'll allow the panel to be degraded far more than, in other words, they don't want to have to replace panels, is the short answer, right? But production degradations is tiny. I can go back to systems I put in 14 years ago, and I'll bet they're producing pretty darn near close to what they were right now, versus 14 years ago. The biggest thing that would happen to a system is shading. The trees around them would grow, and the customer hasn't maintained the trees or kept them trimmed back. I remember a ground mount we did in Sudbury, it had to be around 2008, 2009, and they sold the property, the person moved, he bought another system, he moved to Concord, bought another system from us. But I visited the house, and there was a poplar tree that had grown from a seed to about a 3-inch diameter tree in 10 years, and it was shading the array. So I went out there with a battery-powered Sawzall and just cut the tree down so his panels were no longer in the shade. If you add a battery, so this is adding a 20 kilowatt hour N-phase based battery system. It's a lithium iron phosphate chemistry, very reliable, very stable. You can fully discharge a LiFePO battery and still recharge it. And lo and behold, you get a 14-year pay back, even though I went from 36,000 to 7, so almost doubled the price, but it didn't double the break even. What's happening? There's a bunch of incentives that help batteries. For example, you can take the tax credit on the battery if it's solar charged. You also can join the Connected Solutions program. That is a demand response program that the state has set up. When the weather gets really hot and humid, like we see in July and August, the utility says, hey, we want to use your battery to help reduce demand. That does a couple of things. First off, it means they don't have to start up these dirty, expensive diesel generators, or it reduces the likelihood of that. It also helps stabilize the grid, and they pay you to use your battery. We estimate for a 20 kilowatt hour battery, it's going to be about $1,800 a year, 5-year program, and that program has already been extended to 10 years in Rhode Island, and we expect it to be extended here in Massachusetts as well. So even with just the 5-year incentive, by the time you've reached 5 years, you've spent roughly what you would have spent on a whole house generator, and you haven't bought a drop of fossil fuel, and you haven't had to have a guy come out and tune up your generator every 2 years, do a preventive maintenance, and replace the battery and clean the spark plug and so on and so forth. Right? And on top of that, because the battery program, the Connected Solutions program, is an energy cost savings measure, it qualifies for mass save loans, and you can do a mass save 7-year up to $25,000 towards the battery if you haven't already used the mass save loan for something else, because it's $25,000 per house. So if you've already done heat pumps with a mass save loan, it would reduce what you could borrow towards the battery. What are the environmental benefits? That system I just showed you would knock about 15,000 pounds of carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere every year. And that's like 1.4 cars or almost 9 acres of trees. I get questions a lot. In fact, I teach now on net zero homes. What is net zero? That is a house that produces all the energy it needs to operate. It doesn't produce it when it uses it, so it has to use the grid to sort of work like a battery. And that depends a lot on the house, but we are doing solar systems and making a lot of houses net zero, particularly houses built to modern, like recent, within the last 4 years building code. Older houses, it can be really hard to get to net zero. In fact, I looked at my house, which was built in 1995, and I estimate that I'd need 40 to 50 solar panels, which is 3 times what I have now. And I'd also have to convert to heat pumps, which is probably a couple $100,000 to make my house net zero. It's just not worth it. It's just, there's no economic return to make my house net zero. But new construction, how you build a house has a huge impact on how much energy it uses. And that has been driven into the building code through the stretch code process. And now we're expecting a new net zero code to be rolled out in the next few months. And it'll be optional, towns will have to adopt it, and it will dramatically reduce the amount of energy it takes to run a house, such that you'll be able to generate all of the electricity you need off your roof. Of course, the house has to be all electric, including heat pumps, like what the gentleman before me just talked about. Either it's an air source or a ground source system. And of course, you need solar electric to manage the usage. There's an American flag for you. Think of the nation. This is a house we did in Grafton a few years ago. And stuff that I often get asked, how tough are the panels? They're really tough. They will take 1.5 inches hailstone at 60 miles an hour. While they don't warrant against them, they do test for hail. Warranties, end phase is 25 years. Different manufacturers have 10 or 12-year warranties. Snow, most people let it melt. If you can reach the panels from the ground and you've got a long-handled broom, then sure, scrape the snow off. If you have a ground mount, all you got to do is walk by the ground mount with a gloved hand and brush the snow off. Replacing a roof. If your roof has less than 10 years life left in it, then I recommend you do it before you do the solar system, because it's easily, I don't know, depending on the solar system, $3,000 to $6,000 or $7,000 to have my crews come out, uninstall the system, let your roofer do it, and then me reinstall it. It's a little bit pricey depending on when your system was done, because the racking systems might have to be replaced. And certainly the roof pedestals have to be replaced, because they when you take those off, that rubber gasket on the bottom gets destroyed because it's adhered to the shingle. So you have to replace all the pedestals. And we have to permit it. You know, you can't just do it. You have to get a building permit, and in some cases, electrical permit. And in some really odd cases, the building inspectors are asking us to redo the engineering, even though we got an engineered stamped letter from an engineer back when we did the original installation. So there's all those costs get rolled in. Purchase versus lease. We only sell systems. We don't lease them or do power purchase agreements. What's a power purchase agreement? The system goes on your roof, it belongs to another company, they charge you for the electricity that the system generates, but it's discounted compared to what you would pay for your electricity with National Grid. It can work in some cases. Let's say you have no tax liability, right? You can't use the federal tax credit. There, a PPA might be the way to go. Typically, you're signing up for a 20 to 25-year agreement. They used to be a problem when you tried to sell your house and you had a PPA because it was a lien on the property. The PPA companies and the lease companies have gotten better at handling that, releasing the lien or allowing the lien to transfer to the new owner. Typically, buying out the systems is not cheap because the lease company wants the remaining value for that system. So they look at, let's say you're 10 years into the lease and they say, oh, you've still got 10 years. Well, that 10 years to us is worth many thousands of dollars. So if you want to buy out the lease, you're going to pay us the 10 grand or whatever the number is that system was supposed to generate. Squirrels, if you have a squirrel problem now, then you will probably have a squirrel problem after we put up the solar panels. So we could put up pest guards. If you don't have a squirrel problem now, then the pest guards probably aren't worth it. How much do the systems weigh? About 2.5 pounds per square foot. It's less than a layer of good shingles. And I'm sure there are other questions. And how much time do I have? I got 2 minutes, so fire away. And I will be at the table. Roy and I can answer your questions if I don't answer them now. So, anything else? Going once? In the blue.
What's the SREC program?
The SREC program is gone. There is no SREC program. There was a replacement called the SMART incentive, but in National Grid, the SMART incentive has been used up. So there's no production incentives left in National Grid territory. There is a bill right now in the Senate. Hopefully it will. It says that they directed DOER to come out with a new incentive. They didn't actually give it any money to do this, but so who knows whether there'll be a production incentive. There is still some SMART incentive left in Eversource territory. It's about 5.5 cents a kilowatt hour for every kilowatt hour you produce in the first 10 years of your system's life. Yes, sir.
Do you do also solar cells over parking lots and driveways?
We have not. That's not to say we're not interested. And there are a number of companies now that provide the canopy structures, and we end up managing the installation of those projects. So it is possible. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Stop by our table, get a free yardstick or a memory stick, and we can do a design for you live and show you how many panels will fit on your roof and even estimate production. That's all I got. Thanks.